Hello. I'm going to read to you Island of the Blue Dolphins, and we're reading chapter 25. And I believe this is the chapter I always dread. So here we go. Chapter 25. The Aleuts never again came to the Island of the Blue Dolphins, but every summer I watched for them, and early every spring I gathered shellfish, which I dried and stored in the cave where I kept my canoe. 2 winters after they left, I made more weapons, a spear, a bow, and a quiver of arrows. These I also stored in the place beneath the headland, so if the hunters returned, I would be ready to go to another part of the island, to move from cave to cave, living in my canoe if necessary. For many summers after the Aleuts had gone, the herd of otter left Coral Cove. The old otter which had survived the Aleut spears, and by now were aware that summer was a time of danger, would lead the herd away. They went far off to the kelp beds of tall rock, where they stayed until the first storms of winter. Often Rontu and I would go out to the rock and live there for several days, catching fish for Wanani and the others I had come to know. One summer the otter did not leave, the summer that Rontu died, and I knew that none of the otter who remembered the hunters were left. So this author likes to give you hints and telegraph that things are coming. And so we now know that Rontu's going to die. And I apologize to you in advance. This just really hits me hard as somebody who owns dogs and lives alone. And my dogs mean a lot to me. And so this chapter is always really hard for me. And even thinking about it, it's so well written, it just breaks my heart every time I read it. So sorry in advance for being a ball baby when I'm reading it to you. Okay, here we go. One summer the otter did not leave, the summer that Rontu died, and I knew then that none of the otter who remembered the hunters were left, nor did I think of them often, nor of the white men who had said they would come back but did not come. Until that summer I had kept count of all the moons since the time my brother and I were alone upon the island. For each one that came and went, I cut a mark in a pole beside the door of my house. There were many marks from the roof to the floor. But after that summer I did not cut them any more. The passing of the moons now had come to mean little, and I only made marks to count the 4 seasons of the year. The last year I did not count those. So she knows she's not really ever going to leave the island, so she's not really keeping track of time anymore. It's not really something that she's concerned about or worried about. It was late in the summer that Rontu died. The days since spring, whenever I went to the reef to fish, he would not go with me unless I urged him to. He liked to lie in the sun in front of the house, and I let him, but I did not go so often as in the past. I remember the night that Rontu stood at the fence and barked for me to let him out. Usually he did this when the moon was big, and he came back in the morning. But that night there was no moon, and he did not return. I waited all that day for him until almost dusk, and then I went out to look for him. I saw his tracks and followed them over the dunes and a hill to the lair where he had once lived. There I found him, lying in the back of the cave, alone. At first I thought that he had been hurt, yet there were no wounds on him. He touched my hand with his tongue, but only once, and then he was quiet and scarcely breathed. Since night had fallen, and it was too dark for me to carry Rontu back, I stayed there. I sat beside him through the night and talked to him. At dawn I took him in my arms and left the cave. He was very light, as if something about him had already gone. So those of you that have ever lost a pet, I had a cat that passed away, and he was really, really old, and he was kind of sick. He got kind of sick and he wouldn't eat. And then eventually I just knew he was going to die. He was having a hard time breathing. And I didn't really want to take him to go have him put down, because I knew he wasn't in a lot of pain. He was just kind of struggling with breathing. And I remember I picked him up and I brought him into the house and put him on a towel and sat him down in the living room on the towel. And I remember when I picked him up, he just felt like there was nothing left of him. He felt really light, and you could tell by looking at him that his soul was no longer part of his body, that he was going to pass away. So I can tell that this author has had pets die and knows what that's like, because there definitely is a separation between the spirit of the animal and the body of the animal when it's passing away. Even if you take an animal in to have your pet put down, you can still tell that the animal isn't really there. The animal's soul is separating from its body. I sat beside him through the night and talked to him. At dawn I took him in my arms and left the cave. He was very light, as if something about him had already gone. The sun was up as I went along the cliff. Gulls were crying in the sky. He raised his ears at the sound, and I put him down, thinking that he wished to bark at them, as he always did. He raised his head and followed them with his eyes, but did not make a sound. Rontu, I said, you have always liked to bark at the seagulls. Whole mornings and afternoons you have barked at them. Bark at them now for me. But he did not look at them again. Slowly he walked to where I was standing and fell at my feet. I put my hand on his chest. I could feel his heart beating, but it beat only twice, very slowly, loud and hollow like the waves on the beach, and then no more. Rontu, I cried. Oh, Rontu. I buried him on the headland. I dug a hole in the crevice of the rock, digging for 2 days from dawn until the going down of the sun, and put him there with some sandflowers and a stick he liked to chase when I threw it, and covered him with pebbles of many colors that I gathered on the shore. So she's going to be in real trouble because Rontu was helping her to get through her solitude and living by herself. And she's going to need to get another dog. And you're going to see she's going to go to great lengths to get herself another dog from the wild dog pack, because she knows that she's not going to be able to cope being by herself and being on her own. All right, that was the horrible chapter 25. Every time we read it at centers, we do centers, 3 different centers each day. And there are 6 different groups that we read this with. So for 2 days in a row, 6 times, I break down every time I read this because it's so well written. It's written to tug your heartstrings. If you're somebody that is a pet owner, you know how that feels. And the saddest part of all is that pets only live for a lot shorter time than we live, right? One of our years counts for 7 of their years. So they aren't with us for very long. I've had a cat that lived for 15 years. I had another cat that lived 16 years. My dog Betty, when she passed, that was the most heartbreaking thing ever for me. And I still think about Betty all the time. And so this author understands that. You can tell that he's had pets and that he knows how it feels. And he's used that in his writing to make his writing tug at our heartstrings and to make his writing more expressive. And he does a great job with doing it too, with reverence for the character of Rontu. So I hope you enjoyed reading chapter 25 and watching your teacher blub and cry. And I will talk to you later. I hope it didn't freeze. I can't read that again. I will die. Let's see if I can make it stop.